All right, get ready for a deep dive today. We're tackling some pretty significant global reports, a fascinating mix that really gives us a snapshot of where things stand in the world. And to be honest, it's not all good news.
That's true. These reports do paint a rather sobering picture, especially for the Asia-Pacific region. They really highlight this intricate web of social and economic factors that are all playing out at the same time.
You hit the nail on the head. We're dealing with three big reports today. First up, we have the ESCAP 2024 Social Outlook for Asia and the Pacific, which really zeroes in on social protection across the region. Then we'll move on to the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index, or the MPI, which gives us a new way to look at poverty, going beyond just income. And finally, we have the Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet Report 2024. This one takes this really broad view, looking at global poverty, shared prosperity, and of course, the ever-present issue of climate change.
What strikes me is how all three reports, even though they focus on different aspects of global development, all seem to converge on this one key point. They're all connected. They all really emphasize that poverty, inequality, social protection, and climate change, they're all interwoven, creating this complex web of challenges that we can't ignore.
Yeah, it's like this giant knot we have to untangle.
Yeah.
And speaking of knots, something in the ESCAP report really stood out to me. It says that a staggering 4 out of 5 countries globally have actually cut back on their budgets for education, health, and social protection since 2022. What's the story there?
That is a major red flag, and it's all happening within the context of what's being called a polycrisis. I mean, think about it. We're still dealing with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've got the impacts of conflicts and global tensions and the constant pressure of climate change. It all adds up to a huge strain on public finances, especially in low and middle income countries, many of which are already struggling with debt.
So it's like this financial squeeze. And unfortunately, it seems like essential services are often the first to get cut. It's a pretty worrying situation.
Absolutely. And the ESCAP report really underscores this by focusing on how vulnerable the Asia-Pacific region is to climate change. They even use this striking visual, a graph that compares the percentage of the population covered by social protection with the projected level of climate risk by 2050. And the mismatch is stark. The countries facing the highest climate risks often have the weakest social safety nets.
Wow, that image really says it all. I mean, it's like a recipe for disaster, right? If you're in a region that's highly vulnerable to climate shocks and you don't have a strong social safety net, the consequences could be really severe.
Without a doubt.
Hmm.
Without robust social protection systems, these countries are really ill-equipped to deal with the economic and social upheavals that climate change is already bringing, and that's not even considering the even more severe impacts that are projected for the future. We could be talking about displacement, job losses, and increased poverty.
This brings us to the global MPI, which really expands our understanding of poverty beyond just income.
Right. It goes beyond that single measure and looks at deprivations across 10 indicators grouped into 3 dimensions: health, education, and standard of living. This gives us a much more detailed picture of poverty. It shows us not only who's living in poverty, but how they're experiencing poverty.
It's like zooming in on the specifics of poverty and recognizing that it's not just about lacking money. It's about lacking access to essential services and opportunities.
Precisely. For example, someone might have an income that's above the poverty line, but they could still face serious disadvantages in education or healthcare, which ultimately limits their choices and opportunities in life. The MPI captures those complexities.
This seems particularly relevant to the Asia-Pacific region, where we see a lot of variation in poverty levels, even within individual countries.
Absolutely. The Asia-Pacific region is incredibly diverse with a wide range of economies and societies. The MPI helps us understand the specific challenges that different groups face in this context.
So we've established that climate change is a major threat, particularly in regions with inadequate social protection systems. And we've seen how the MPI gives us this more comprehensive view of poverty. Now, let's turn to the Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet Report to see how it connects all of this on a global scale.
What really jumps out at me in this report is the bleak projection that the decade from 2020 to 2030 could be a lost decade for poverty reduction. Despite all the progress made between 1990 and 2014, global poverty reduction has stalled, and the report attributes this to a combination of factors.
A lost decade. That's a pretty strong statement. What's driving this worrisome trend?
The report points to several interconnected challenges. We see poverty concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, a growing number of people living in fragile and conflict-affected areas, and overall sluggish global economic growth.
And to make things even worse, the report predicts that by 2024, a staggering three-quarters of the world's poorest people will be living in either sub-Saharan Africa or these fragile and conflict-ridden areas.
That's right. And to really drive home this point, they've introduced a new measure called the Global Prosperity Gap.
Okay, help me understand that. What exactly is the global prosperity gap?
Imagine a prosperity standard set at $25 a day per person. The global prosperity gap represents, on average, how much global incomes would need to rise to reach that level. And in 2024, this gap is a whopping 4.9.
So essentially, global incomes, on average, would need to increase fivefold just for everyone to reach that $25 per day threshold. That's a pretty daunting figure.
It is, and it really highlights the immense scale of the challenge we face in achieving shared prosperity, especially when you consider that this gap isn't evenly distributed.
Meaning that some regions are facing a much steeper climb than others?
Exactly. For example, sub-Saharan Africa, even though it represents only about 16% of the global population, accounts for a massive 39% of that global prosperity gap.
So we're seeing this stark picture of global inequality emerge. Some regions are being left behind, and the gap between the haves and have-nots is widening.
Precisely. And without addressing the root causes of this inequality, things like unequal access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, as well as the devastating impacts of climate change and conflict, closing this gap will remain an elusive goal.
This is a lot to process. We've got this complex web of interconnected challenges. Rising inequality, weak social safety nets, persistent poverty, and the looming threat of climate change. Not exactly light dinner conversation.
No, not really. But what I do find encouraging is that these reports don't just focus on the problems, they also point to potential solutions.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's shift gears and explore those potential solutions in the next part of our deep dive.
Picking up where we left off, it's pretty clear we're up against some serious global challenges. But these reports don't just leave us with a sense of doom and gloom. They actually offer some potential solutions too. For example, the ESCAP report really stresses the importance of strengthening social protection systems. It's a key strategy for building resilience, especially in the face of climate change.
So we're not just talking about expanding the safety net, right? We're talking about making sure those nets are actually strong enough to support people when they need it most. So what are some concrete steps to make that happen?
Well, the report outlines several strategies. One that really stands out is this idea of integrating universal social protection into national development plans. Making it a core priority right from the start, not just an afterthought, and critically linking it with climate policies.
So it's not just about treating social protection as this separate issue. It's about weaving it into these broader strategies for sustainable development. It's about acknowledging those interconnections we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The ESCAP report repeatedly emphasizes how interconnected social protection and climate resilience are. It highlights the need to strengthen these systems so they can better handle climate-related shocks, like natural disasters, droughts, displacement, you name it.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, if a climate disaster hits, having a strong social safety net can be the difference between recovering and falling deeper into poverty.
Absolutely. And of course, none of this is possible without proper funding. The report makes it very clear we need to dedicate enough resources to social protection, even if it means reconsidering budget priorities or making changes to tax systems.
It sounds like it all comes down to political will. Are governments actually ready to make those tough choices about spending?
That's definitely a key factor. But it's not just about governments acting alone. The report calls for more collaboration, stronger partnerships between governments, trade unions, civil society organizations, all sorts of stakeholders. It's about ensuring that social protection solutions are not only effective, but inclusive, reaching those who need them the most.
It's a collective effort, a shared responsibility to create a more just and equitable society. The ESCAP report also delves into the role of digital technology in delivering social protection. What's the key takeaway there?
Well, the Asia-Pacific region has seen incredible progress in internet access and digital payment systems. This opens up new opportunities for more efficient and targeted social protection programs. Think back to how many countries were able to quickly distribute financial assistance during the COVID-19 pandemic using digital platforms. It's a perfect example.
It's amazing how technology can be used for good, especially in times of crisis. But we also have to be aware of potential downsides, right? Not everyone has access to technology or the skills to use it effectively.
You've hit on a crucial point. The report acknowledges that if we don't bridge the digital divide, we risk making existing inequalities even worse. It's not enough to simply introduce new technologies. We need to invest in digital inclusion, making sure that everyone benefits from these advancements. That could involve digital literacy programs, expanding internet access in rural communities, providing targeted support for those who face barriers to using technology.
It's about making sure that technology empowers people, not leaves them behind. Now, let's bring the Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet report back into the mix. It also offers some insights into policy actions that could address those interconnected challenges of poverty, prosperity, and climate change. What stands out to you?
One of the key messages is the importance of maximizing synergies between different policy goals. Take investing in renewable energy, for example. It can actually achieve multiple things at once. It can create jobs, reduce poverty by providing access to affordable energy, and, of course, help mitigate climate change.
It's about finding those win-win-win scenarios, where solutions have positive ripple effects across multiple areas.
Exactly. But the report also warns that sometimes we have to carefully manage trade-offs. For instance, while economic growth is crucial for lifting people out of poverty, it has to be sustainable and inclusive. It can't come at the cost of environmental damage or worsen existing inequalities.
It's like walking a tightrope between progress and sustainability.
That's a great analogy. And that's where smart policy design becomes so important. The report really emphasizes the need for data-driven decision-making, tailoring policies to specific situations, and making sure that the voices of marginalized groups are heard and their needs are met.
So it's not just about grand ideas, it's about the nitty-gritty of making it happen. It's about translating those ideas into real change on the ground.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond just talk and taking concrete action, based on evidence and a deep understanding of the challenges and opportunities in each situation. The Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet report highlights how crucial data is for crafting effective solutions. But it also raises a big question. How do we improve data collection and analysis, especially in areas where data gaps are the most significant?
You're right. It's great to talk about data-driven policies,
Right.
but that data has to be reliable, accessible, relevant to the specific issues we're facing. It seems like the Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet report shines a light on the need for a more comprehensive approach to global development.
Exactly. It underscores the need for policies that tackle interconnected challenges, encourage sustainable growth, and make sure the benefits of progress are shared equitably. It's not just about reducing poverty, it's about creating a world where everyone has a chance to truly thrive.
It's a vision of shared prosperity, a world where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Precisely. And that vision requires us to rethink traditional development approaches. The Poverty, Prosperity, and Planet report brings in this concept of a prosperity standard. It goes beyond simply measuring income and looks at what it actually means for people to flourish.
Okay, let's dig into this prosperity standard a bit more. It sounds really interesting. All right, so let's unpack this prosperity standard. What exactly does it entail?
Well, the report sets a prosperity standard at $25 per person per day. It argues that achieving this level of income is crucial for individuals to truly thrive, not just survive.
Okay, a benchmark for a decent standard of living globally. But I'm curious, why $25 specifically?
It's not an arbitrary number. The report actually connects it to the average income level, where countries transition from upper middle income to high income status.
So it's grounded in real-world data.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So it's like saying that this income level is where people generally have access to quality education, good health care, decent housing, all the things that contribute to a fulfilling life.
Exactly. It's about enabling people to not just get by, but to actually flourish, to pursue their goals and live meaningful lives. But let's be realistic. A five-fold increase in global incomes. That sounds like a monumental task.
It does, yeah.
I agree, it's a significant challenge. But the report argues that it's not just about how much income people earn, but how that income is distributed across society. It emphasizes the need for a more inclusive growth model, one where the benefits of economic progress are shared more equitably.
So it's not just about baking a bigger pie, it's about ensuring everyone gets a decent slice.
Precisely. And to achieve that, we need to tackle the structural factors that perpetuate inequality. We're talking about discrimination, limited access to quality education and healthcare, and unequal opportunities. We have to level the playing field and create a system where everyone has a fair shot at achieving prosperity.
It's about creating a world where everyone, not just a select few, has the opportunity to truly thrive.
Exactly. And the report highlights that reaching this prosperity standard involves more than just economic policies. It requires building societies that are just, fair, and sustainable. It calls for a holistic approach to development that considers the well-being of people and the planet.
It's a vision that encompasses not just material wealth, but also social justice, environmental sustainability, and a shared responsibility for our collective future.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful message woven throughout these reports. Yes, they paint a stark picture of the challenges we face, but they also remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for creating a better world.
They're like a call to action, an invitation to engage thoughtfully and work together to build a more just, equitable, and sustainable future.
Well said. We may not solve these problems overnight, but we can certainly start taking steps in the right direction. Even seemingly small actions, when taken collectively, can create a ripple effect leading to meaningful change.
So there you have it, our deep dive for today. We've explored some complex global challenges, poverty, inequality, climate change, but we've also uncovered some inspiring ideas and hopeful possibilities. And that's a powerful reminder that the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by our choices and actions.
And that's perhaps the most crucial takeaway. We have the power to shape a better world, but it demands recognizing our interconnectedness, embracing a long-term vision, and acting with courage and compassion.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.